make it today. My name is Garth Dano. I'm running for the position of Grant County Prosecutor. Bill, I'd like to thank you and the Vision 2020 people for putting this on. I would say preliminarily, in the allotted time, that one of the things I'm most proud of about being in Moses Lake, thinking back on the history I've been here, is my father was very instrumental and founded the Moses Lake Economic Development and the Downtown Development Task Force back in the late 70s. I assisted him with that. He had a lot of good ideas about improving Moses Lake, and I applaud the Vision 2020 for carrying on that legacy, and with the idea in mind, mostly thankless, and the volunteer activities that goes on with this organization to try to improve the downtown. And one of the things I'm proud of also is having received a Vision 2020 award for in the past. I'm here today with Mr. Lee to answer questions. I didn't quite know how this was going to work out today or what we were going to do. I didn't anticipate having this big of a forum, but I'm glad you're all here, and hopefully give us an opportunity to address some specific questions that you all have about why I'm running for prosecutor, why Mr. Lee is seeking re-election, and probably a choice and difference in approach. My approach and decision to run for the prosecutor's job was made after a lot of soul searching and thinking about it. It's been suggested that saw somebody said, well, he's just going to retire. This is his retirement program. I say to all of you, that's not so. I believe that I can bring to the office a lot of experience that I have. I've been here in Moses Lake since 1980. I practiced law a lot, primarily in the first 20 years, primarily civil practice, ranging everything from condemnation cases, water law, dissolution, everything that lawyers do. I began doing criminal work about 20 years ago, in addition to what I do civilly. And I believe I have I know it sounds self-serving, but I believe I have a breadth of background in all those areas to assist me. I'd say that the prosecutor's job requires that I hear another criticism of me that I'm not going to be tough on crime, or that I'm going to do quick plea deals for those serious felons. That's ridiculous. Obviously, I intend to take the cases very seriously. I've spoken to most of the law enforcement officers of Grant County. The vast majority of them tell me that they're going to support me. I told them I'm happy to meet with them individually. I intend to have all the prosecutors, if I'm elected, all the prosecutors in the office know each officer, and have all the officers' names at their disposal at their desk. So as they go through cases that are brought to the prosecutor's office, and I didn't pay attention to Alan, obviously, excuse me, so I'll just end it by saying that I intend to work very, very hard.
Those of you that are here know a little bit about me and the prosecutor's office. I haven't been in this county for 30 years. I've been here 8, and I've been fighting crime the entire time. So I don't have the background in this community, but I have a background in law and prosecution. I'm also a Vision 2020 recipient with my wife, and all I've done since I've come to Grant County is fight crime. 100%, that's what I do. I don't have experience in water law or condemnations, but I have nearly a decade in criminal prosecution. I'm a former Marine, I'm a father of 3, and I'm very happy to be raising my family here in Moses Lake. I want to tell you that when I took over the prosecutor's office in 2009, I made a lot of changes and updates. I modernized the office. We're a lot more digital. We've cut some wasteful spending. We've been under budget every single year I've been in office. We've also increased trial conviction rates. Last year we had 30 trial convictions in Superior Court alone. We do 5,000 cases approximately in our 3 different divisions. That's a lot to know about. That's a lot to study. I've spent the last 5.5 years running an office with 30 people. Budget of about $2.6 million. And I've never been over budget. We've had major trial successes. In my last 4 years, we've won 3 murder trials. Every trial that we've taken to trial on a murder, we've won. Personally, I've prosecuted 2 of those murders, and we won. My trial conviction rate, and this is what matters, is your ability to convict criminals. Put them away. Keep this community safe. It can't be questioned. I've tried the serious cases, the most serious cases, and I've won. I'm endorsed by the sheriff for that reason. I'm also endorsed by all 3 county commissioners. I'm also endorsed by the county clerk. I'm also endorsed by retired Supreme Court Justice Jim Johnson. These are people who look deeply into what a prosecutor's office does, know me, my background, my abilities, and they're supporting me. I'm really, really pleased with what we've done in the office over the last few years, but I want to tell you this race is not just about me. It's about this community. It's about moving forward. And it's about making sure the team of prosecutors that we have in place right now, that I've recruited and retained over the last few years, that are getting those trial results, are still in place. This county doesn't have a history of doing a lot of trials in the earlier part of this century. It doesn't, and it resulted in a lawsuit from the ACLU. We don't have that problem anymore because we're aggressively prosecuting cases against an Office of Public Defense that, this is something you need to know, has a budget of $3 million. I want you to think about that for a second. The prosecutor's office that you have in place has less funding than the Office of Public Defense, but we're still getting results and we're still moving forward, and I really would like the opportunity to continue serving as a career prosecutor. Thank you.
I would describe my relationship with all those entities or all those people as excellent, with the exception probably of the prosecutor's office currently. I get along well with all the law enforcement individual officers. I believe I get along well with all 3 of the Superior Court judges, 2 of the District Court judges now. I don't get along well with 1 of the judges. And I think that's an outgrowth of the fact that sometimes I think judges make poor decisions, and that probably shouldn't be an elected position. But I think overall I have a good working relationship with them. I just was with Bill Weister, our former sheriff, a moment ago, who's supporting me and endorsing me for this position, along with many other people. I won't give a list of all the people like Mr. Lee just did or endorsing me, Supreme Court Justice, Court of Appeals Justices, most of the retired judges throughout Eastern Washington. People can look on the website and see that. But I believe I have a breadth of experience and knowledge and familiarity with all those people to work well with them. And I plan on doing that.
Okay, the question for Mr. Lee. How would you describe your relationships with judges, lawyers, and law enforcement in Grant County?
Well, judges, exceptional. I have a very good working relationship with them. The Superior Court justices asked me to sit on the Criminal Trial Court Advisory Council with them to work on solving problems with the administration of our court systems, and I've done that. I also sit on the law library with lawyers here in the community and judges. I actually sat down with Judge Antos just earlier this week to work on some of the civil issues and talk about how we can get more civil cases to trial. So my relationship with the judges in district and superior court is very good. Same with law enforcement. As I said, I'm endorsed by the sheriff, and I've worked side by side with the men and women of law enforcement for about 8 years. I've taken their cases to trial and I've won, and I've sat down with them on the hard cases and said, here's the reasons why this case can be improved and how. So we have a strong working relationship, the kind you can only develop by working side by side and getting results. When it comes to lawyers, I'm going to say that there's a lot of lawyers here that aren't going to support me because it's not good for their bottom line. If you're a criminal defense attorney, you probably don't want to support me because I'm going to take your clients to trial and I'm going to convict them, bottom line. So many ways to answer that question, but I want to just stick to a couple of the basic ones. And kind of agree with what Mr. Dano said earlier today, in that there's a really clear choice here in that there's 2 different approaches that are being talked about that we will offer. The people of this community know what I will do. They don't exactly know what my opposition will do, but it will be different. What sets us apart, first and foremost, I think, is our approach to how we will address public safety. I'm committed to public safety first and foremost. We also have differences in background, life experience, and legal experience. As you heard my opponent talk about his legal experience, it was in a variety of things that, while important for a general practitioner, really aren't important for a prosecutor. Everything I've done has been focused on management and leadership of a prosecutor's office and trying cases as a prosecutor. So actual applicable experience is a huge difference. Thank you.
Mr. Dano, what do you believe sets you apart from your opponent?
Many things. I would like to point out, I think, one thing Mr. Lee just said that I strongly disagree with, that does separate us, is that I think that breadth of experience is huge. I think one of the jobs that the average citizen or public doesn't understand is advising the county commissioners on a number of issues. And Mr. Lee didn't have that experience. Before he ran for the job last time, he came to me and asked me to endorse him. So obviously he must think something of me as a trial lawyer, or as a lawyer that he respects and regards. And one of the things about that is giving solid advice to the county commissioners is an important aspect of it, and that requires having a breadth of knowledge in a myriad of civil areas, such as zoning, employment, land use, growth management issues. Mr. Lee has none of that experience. He's deferring those decisions to outside entities. So I think that one of the things, we have a civil deputy and staff that we pay a substantial amount of money to, and I don't think we need to have those. That's one thing to save the county some money and also to reduce the budget. Mr. Lee's indicated that he has reduced the budget of the prosecutor's office, yet we've added, from when his predecessor was in office, we had 11 prosecutors. We now have 15, I believe, 14 or 15, Mr. Lee and 3 others. I intend to fight crime as well. When he makes the statement that lawyers fear him, frankly, that's wrong. Frankly, the problem with that is that lawyers make more money if they go to trial than if they don't. And so that's not even an accurate statement to make. I plan on being tough on crime as well. I plan, like he does and his office does, of making, there's plea bargains that have to take place, because as he said, there's only 37 trials took place in 2013 out of a number of 800 felonies. So there is a substantial number of plea bargaining that goes on, and that's part of what we're going to have to do. Thank you.
This next
Clear to everybody in this room that the most important issue facing the prosecutor's office is really the most important issue facing our community, and that's crime, and specifically gang crime. I see a lot of people in this community who've been here a long time, and I'd ask you to search your memory and ask, was there criminal street gangs in Grant County 30 years ago, 20 years ago? I got here 8 years ago, and when I got here, the gangs were already here. They were already getting a foothold. There was tremendous issues with what was going on in juvenile prosecution. And you saw a spike of juvenile crime in 2008, and you saw increase in gang crime. And if there's anything that can affect the well-being of our youth, of our community long-term, of prosperity for the small businesses, it's gang crime and graffiti. And so that's why we created a gang task force. This year, for the first time ever, we have gang prosecutors in every single courtroom, adult misdemeanor, juvenile, and adult felony. So I think we have to go after the gangs, and that's what we're doing, but I want to really, really make a commitment to do that starting from this day forward. But that's the big issue. We have a solution for it. Thank you.
I agree with many things that Mr. Lee just said. I'd also say that, from my perspective, if nothing else, Grant County's gone from probably about 60,000 residents to 90,000 residents since I've been here. And it's just an observation that I say to people quite often, and that is, it appears to me that I believe we have about 20% of our population that really doesn't have a moral compass. And there's going to be a lot of crime. And everybody in this room wants to feel safe. Everybody wants to feel like we're the prosecutor's office. Okay, thanks, Bill. that it's going to be a safe place and safe environment. Yet, and the reality is that I take it most of the people in this room are fairly conservative. We don't want to pay for that. We don't want to pay for more police or more prosecutors or more courts, and to have a totally safe environment. You probably need more of those, which would be more taxes. And as a prosecutor, obviously, my goal would be to go after the criminals, to do that, and I think maybe a thing that differentiates us is I want to get to cases quickly. Our jail in 1986 was built to house 85 people. It now houses typically 200 plus. That's a drain constantly on the resources of the county, and so my goal would be to get those people prosecuted quickly, have those plea agreements in place within 3 weeks or a month of filing the case, rather than going back and back and back to court and keeping people housing right in the jail for months and months and months at county expense. So I want to expedite that process to get those people convicted and moved out to the Department of Corrections. Thank you. Well, I think generally it's probably not a popular thing to say that I'm in favor of decriminalizing marijuana. Here's the problem. Here's the big problem as I see it. It's a little similar to prohibition. And how did that work for us, ultimately? I don't have the numbers or statistics available right now to answer that question intelligently with numbers. Is it a concern for our youth that people are smoking marijuana and doing that, and should we go after those people hard that are distributing marijuana? And now that it's been legalized, is that a good or a bad thing? Obviously, the citizens of the state say that it's now legal. Most of the people that I've encountered were users of marijuana, and under our prosecution scheme as we had it up until, I guess, this year, a lot of people face very serious consequences, including jail and so forth, for possession. Now that's been decriminalized. I personally feel that will cut back a substantial drain of use of law enforcement officers going after people with just using. Obviously that's going to be a huge, I think, savings to the county criminal justice system. I still intend and still believe it's critical that we go after people that are going to bring drugs in, because I frankly feel like people are going to use marijuana, and I think they're probably going to probably not use the state stores to go buy their pot. I think they're probably going to buy it from people on the street where they can get it cheaper, and they're not being supervised by the state. So that'll be a problem and issue to contend with. That's about as simple as I can be. Thank you.
It's already been decriminalized. That's my number one view, is the law is the law. And I think sometimes prosecutors throughout the state can kind of get a little on their soapbox and start trying to tell people what the law should or shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, the job of the prosecutor is to enforce what laws have been made by all of you. And the people of the state of Washington have said it's not a crime, except for certain circumstances. I guess maybe the question is, do I think that decision on that initiative was a good thing or a bad thing? I think time will tell, but there are certainly a lot of problems that we are all going to see over the next few years as we work through this process. First of all, it's not legal in the state of Washington under federal law. So we've created a gray market, and these businesses are going to have to find a way to conduct business and financing, but no bank will touch their money because the federal government could have access to it. So you're going to have a cash market industry that could potentially lead to more organized crime, kind of the opposite of what was intended. Another thing that is a problem is with increased access will follow increased use. Now, we talk about prohibition, whether or not it was right or wrong to legalize alcohol. But one thing we do know is, yes, there were violent crimes associated with that, but after it was legalized and the vehicles came around, we saw an increase in vehicular homicides, people killing other people driving under the influence. I think it's about 40,000 people a year that die from that. Now we have people using other drugs, including marijuana, and the testing procedures have not been studied yet. So we're in kind of a flux period. We know a 0.08 alcohol level, you're under the influence. So we can police that very effectively when it comes to keeping our roadways safe. Marijuana, we don't know that yet. And so it will be much harder to police when it comes to keeping our roadways safe. Thank you.
Next question for Mr.
I think the first thing that comes to mind with regard to criminal prosecution, what I would do is if elected, I will meet with the deputy prosecutors. I indicated before, Alan White, who's in the back of the room, I intend to bring him in as the chief criminal deputy to look at the cases that are being brought to the office for purposes of charging decisions. There's two types of cases. Obviously, the case that happens immediately, the person's incarcerated. The police may not have all the reports they have necessary to complete to prosecute that individual, but I'm talking about the cases in which they're fully investigated by law enforcement, brought to the prosecutor's office. Before that case is filed, I would make sure that the officer has all of the evidence, the case is ready to try, because at the time that it hits the office and the time that it's filed, it should be ready to try within 3 weeks. And that means no delays. Anecdotally, I've been involved in a couple of cases over the last several years that have been continued and delayed and back to court 12, 13 times, because further evidence needs to be gotten by the officer involved. Information's not in the file. That just adds to the backlog. So what I want to do primarily is make sure those cases are set to go at the time they're filed, and then turn those over to the public defenders primarily who defend these cases with the idea in mind, all right, here's the file, here's the case. What's your defense? I also want to increase the quality of the lawyers involved in the office. In other words, to improve their trial skills and their abilities. Mr. Lee's indicated he's brought a trial team in here. When he started, there were lawyers, I believe the average experience is about 11 years. Now it's substantially less than that. He has 5 prosecutors that, I'm out of time, that have, well, I guess I'll be quiet. There's a lot more to say about that stuff.
Well, that's an interesting question for the incumbent to answer. The thing that I would do is not necessarily change direction or course. I think we actually have a very good office in place with a very good team. We took a lot of cases to trial last year. We got convictions in over 80% of them. So the idea that they need trial training is maybe being a little taken out of context. Can they improve? Yeah, absolutely. Everybody can improve in everything they can do. And we send them continual training, and we'll continue to do that if I'm reelected. But I want to touch on this idea that cases are backlogged or delayed. I heard that. I looked at the numbers on that. And the state office of the courts that administers the courts went and looked, and they said in 2013, the last fiscal year, they want all the cases done in 9 months. The state average is after 9 months, approximately 90% of all cases are finished. 2% better, Grant County. We are better than the state average as far as resolution of cases in time. So this idea that there's a backlog, it doesn't really stand up to the facts. The other thing is, when we're talking about violent crime, I heard that one change would be cases wouldn't be filed until the case was ready to go. That is a recipe for disaster, and it is not supported by the law. If you look at the RCWs, what they say is that on violent crimes, the prosecutor should charge those cases if there is probable cause when the case comes to them, and get assurance from law enforcement that the investigation will be completed timely. Imagine a first-degree murder was committed or a drive-by, and they book the person in jail, and they say the investigation is not complete, but we have probable cause to get this person detained. Again, you have a very clear choice. I would charge that person, and we would go through the process. That's how it works. I wouldn't release them back into the community. Thank you.
case that I've handled that's most affected me and the role of prosecutor, and so, can I have a clarification of that, Bill? Are you talking about a civil case, criminal case?
I'm throwing it out there.
All right. Okay.
Excuse me, could we repeat that question?
Okay, by the way, this is the only time I'm going to do that, because I gave the rules at the beginning, just to be fair to both.
Fair enough, I'll answer, Bill.
So here it is. Which has been the case you've handled that's most affected you, and how you think about the role of a prosecutor?
First of all, I need to say, I saw this on TV and some debate went on, but I need to say, first of all, that was misquoted by Mr. Lee, his last response. That I said there was a difference between the types of cases I would try and prosecute. The ones that obviously the first degree murder, in those cases, I take the same approach he talked about. I was talking about cases where there's been an investigation and a later filing. With regard to your question specifically, Bill, that's so hard because so many cases come to mind. Obviously, probably in terms of personal angst and difficulty in handling something was probably representing Barry Lukaitis. That was probably the hardest thing I had to do in my professional career, working with him. But I would say that overall, I try to take the approach that every client I have and have had, and every case I've had is the most important case I'm working on at the time. And I take the same approach if I'm the prosecutor. I think one thing about me that the public may not know is my farm background and my history of working hard. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job. And if I go in the prosecutor's office, it's not going to be a 40-hour-a-week job. It's going to be substantially more than that. I'll spend nights or weekends, whatever it takes. And I fully intend to protect the citizens of this county against serious offenders. Thank you.
So that's really hard to answer on an emotional level because I've handled a lot of serious cases. Cases where women have been raped, kidnapped, people have been murdered. And you meet with the family members of these people. And you look into their eyes and you think of what you have to do to win that case. And after you've done a few of those, you realize you have to do the job well. You have to know what you're doing. You have to go after the criminal. Maybe on an emotional level, the most serious is a case I won't mention by name, but it was a woman whose home was burglarized and she was raped. Took that case to trial. We won. The defendant's doing 10 years to life in prison. But you spend time with these victims. And it's very emotional and it's very rewarding. It's not a job where you're going to get really rich, but it is a job where you can do good deeds for your fellow man. That's why I do this job. Thank you. I think it's pretty clearly gangs. I've touched on that before. It's gangs. You want to ask me the question again, and I'll say it's gangs. The solution to that is multifaceted. It's not just the prosecutor's office. It's not just law enforcement. It's the entire community. You have to be involved in the community. We have to do a better job as keepers of this community, making sure that young kids are out of trouble. That's why we've committed to such a robust level of juvenile prosecution, because we believe that if you get these gang members early, keep them in school, then they will stop committing crimes, they will stay out of the gangs, and we can reduce future crime. It is so much cheaper to prevent future crime than it is to prosecute it. And I think that's really the future of prosecution. It's the way to go, is to be involved in the community, help coach a local sports team, get in there with those kids, make sure they stay in school, which is why we just started getting involved in the truancy. Because there's a direct correlation to high school graduation rates and reduced crime. So what's the biggest thing? The future, our youth, keeping them out of gangs, keeping them involved.
I would agree with part of what Mr. Lee just said. I think that's a significant problem as well, and I also feel the solution to that is I had a good conversation, with Tom Jones, the sheriff, if elected, and I talked to him about going to every community, and he and I spending time going and identifying where all these gang members live, their friends. The world has changed so much in terms of the ability to see down on communities and to go into those neighborhoods and actually talk to those people that live there, actually talk to the members of those households where the gang members live and they're wannabes. I agree with being involved in the community. I believe the many things that Mr. Lee just said. I think that it takes a community involvement. I think everybody wants to just throw up their hands and say, well, let the cops and let the prosecutors handle it. We need to get involved. That's part of what this group is about, is to create a safer environment. And that requires all of us. I think we're going to have more block watches and cameras everywhere moving forward. The other thing I think faces the county that's a real concern, as I talk to a lot of farmers and ranchers, is the farm-related theft issue that goes on. Primarily, people on methamphetamines steal with impunity and are committing a lot of major crime within the county. That's a huge issue. I think those are things that, and, supporting law enforcement officers, making sure the prosecutor's office is supporting each one of the deputies out in the field, and they feel that they bring somebody in to prosecute them, that the prosecutor's office is going to deal with those effectively. Thank you.
Well, that's a pretty nuanced question when you get down to it, and I hope I can summarize in 2 minutes. But as I said before, prevention beats prosecution every time. I would much rather live in a community where we had 500 felonies committed a year than 1,000, but 1,000 were prosecuted effectively every time. The key is to prevent them from committing crime. And if we can do that through rehabilitative measures, we should absolutely do that. One of the things we have done in that regard is we've looked at minor possession, low-level possession of drugs for people with no violent history, no criminal history, and we've been diverting those cases that are technically felonies into our district court where we have a local probation department where we can get those people treatment and potentially cure the sickness. You look at a lot of these people that, and really what we're talking about is drug crime. A lot of these people don't want to be addicted to these drugs, but you need to put essentially a hammer over their head, and that's jail, and you need to give them some guidance and some treatment options and put them together. And so we are doing that. We just started doing that about a year ago, and I think you're seeing that in a lot of other jurisdictions. Some other jurisdictions have drug courts. We don't have the funding for that yet, but it would be a very, very good thing. We're kind of doing a modified version of that because prevention beats prosecution. So yeah, if we can do it, we should. But you have to look at the criminal history of these people and make a determination of whether or not they're likely to become a violent criminal as well. And you have to look at the drug types because different drugs affect people differently. Thank you.
Mr. Daniel, same question. What is your view on increasing rehabilitation efforts and reducing sentencing for non-violent? Let me repeat that for you. What is your view on increasing rehabilitation efforts and reducing sentencing for non-violent offenders?
I think, first of all, I think the Spokane County has done a good job with the drug court. I think we had one for a period of time, and I'm not aware that it's still functioning or operating. Mr. Lee represented that we're now, some felony cases are being diverted down or taken down to district court. Those of you in the room, felony cases are crimes for which someone goes to jail or prison for more than a year, and misdemeanors are less than a year and handled by our district courts. My feeling is that we ought to have an active drug court. It's pure and simple. It's a huge problem, huge drain. I was thinking about two things this weekend. One was that, and the second was domestic violence. As I heard on 60, the program Sunday morning, that 1 out of 3 women are subject to domestic violence. Drugs and drug problems, consumption of drugs is a huge problem in our society. And the stark reality is most people in town that don't do drugs don't have little or no little tolerance for people to do. I get that. But it's a huge drain on law enforcement. So I think having a drug court in place and having prosecutors assigned to that is something I will want to put in place and meet with the judges to get that done, because I think that should be, takes it away. I also suggested that we do divide the clerk's office up and do night court. Divide the clerk's office up in half. Nobody said when you became a public servant that you had a right to work from 9 to 5. And I'd like to see the clerk's office divided up so that we could handle and maybe have a drug court in the evening to take off the burden that's going on during the day and deal with those issues. I agree with what Mr. Lee said. I think that we do have good, right now, a good probation department, but I want to see a lot of our activity spent on that. Thank you.
Well, I think that there are things that we are already doing, and people have to understand that the prosecutor's office is one department in the criminal justice system, one player in a bigger system that is our community. You have the courts, you have the police officers, and you have all of you, like I said. And like I said, prevention is a big thing. Our primary mechanism is prosecuting people after the fact, but like I said, we need to look at the root cause of their criminal behavior. Right now, one thing I'm very concerned with is future property crimes caused by people who are addicted to heroin. We've talked a lot about methamphetamine over the last decade or so, but I'm here to tell you that because of things that have gone on across the country, heroin is on the rise, and it will continue to be on the rise. And that's a very long, complicated discussion having to do with pharmaceutical laws, opiates, the prescription opiates, and how we've cracked down on methamphetamine. What we have to realize, though, is those people that are addicted to heroin, when they come off heroin, they go through the most severe withdrawals of any drug. And they will do anything, steal anything, to get it. So the majority of our property crimes now, burglaries, robberies, are committed by people addicted to heroin. Not methamphetamine, heroin. And so what we need to do is look at how to get people no longer addicted to heroin. And so that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. When you have someone who has committed no violent crimes, but they're simply caught in possession of heroin, we need to get them in treatment right away. Because we learned this in the 90s, you can actually get people off heroin. You can successfully stop that addiction. But history is repeating itself, and we have to go back and look at what we did in the 90s and do it again.
Here we have the same question from Mr. Dano. It seems the prosecutor's office tends to spend the majority of its time on criminal behavior that has already occurred. If elected, do you have a plan to address the root causes of criminal behavior, and if so, what is the plan?
You know, I think that the one thing that needs to be said is this is a huge societal problem, and the prosecutor's office is not going to solve any of these problems. The prosecutor's office isn't designed or equipped to deal with these societal issues of drug addiction. We can help, we can assist, we can do many things that Mr. Lee just mentioned. In addition to that, I believe that it really talks about having town hall meetings, talking to families here in Grant County. We're tired of people being prosecuted for drug-related crimes and what it causes, and the death and carnage it causes, not only the people who are ripped off or get their property stolen, but the destruction of the families involved. So if elected, obviously I intend to spend some time going to schools, talking to parents, getting them involved, to try to influence them, to recognize the problem, and to try to deal with it effectively, to stay away from those things. But we're not going to be able to solve most of that from the prosecutor's standpoint, but that's a stated goal I have, because I want to feel safe here in Grant County. I want to have this be a place where I want my family to live, and the truth of the matter is, it's starting to get scarier for people all the time. So that means we have, we hire more police, we do all those things to protect ourselves, we gotta first of all recognize the problem and the statistics and deal with those effectively. My plan would be, again, to go to the local schools, talk to the principals, talk to the parents, and start there. And that's what I intend to do if elected. Thank you.
County Commissioners, how do you handle the situation when the commissioners approach you for legal counsel on an issue that, legally speaking, you are at odds with them? You feel if they proceed, it could be quite costly for the taxpayers. How would you
Objection,
proceed?
objection, compound question. Go ahead,
Audience question, go ahead.
go ahead.
That's it. I'll repeat it once.
No, it's fine. I think I understand the gist of it. And, the quick answer is that I need to advise the county commissioners what the law is. Whatever the law is, and they need to follow it. I can't just say, okay, I know you don't agree with what the law is, county commissioners, so I'm gonna give you advice to do that. I have to give them advice as to whatever the problem is, whatever the legal issue involved is, and give them concrete legal advice that's based upon whatever the case law is or the statutes require, and advise them on that basis. Thank you.
Mr. Lee, as legal counsel of the county commissioners, how do you handle the situation when the commissioners approach you for legal counsel on an issue that, legally speaking, you are at odds with them? You feel if they proceed, it could be quite costly for taxpayers. How would you proceed?
So, a little bit of background on how the prosecutor's office works. Our job is actually to represent and advise the county commissioner. We do that in a civil capacity, no different than any of the lawyers here today do with their clients. And there are rules for lawyers regarding confidentiality and our fiduciary duties to them. It's really quite straightforward. When an issue is presented to us by the county commissioners, we advise them confidentially, just like any lawyer would advise their client confidentially, the pros and cons of every decision. In the end, the decision on how to proceed on any matter is the county commissioner's decision. And just like any of you who've had a lawyer for one of your businesses here by Vision 2020, you'll go and talk to your lawyer, they'll advise you the pros and cons, and they might tell you absolutely don't do something, but at the end of the day, it's your decision to make, and the lawyers essentially close the books, and that's the end of it. You represent the commissioners, you don't control them.
Okay, this next question is system in Grant County. What do you see are the benefits of the job of prosecutor?
And the frustrations is the culture of the office that I see. It's no secret that Mr. Lee doesn't care for me personally, and that's translated out to his deputy prosecutors and how they treat me, and I see how they treat other lawyers. I intend to, if elected, to stop that. The role of the prosecutor is to rise above any frustrations, petty frustrations that one has with opposing counsel, deal with each other respectfully, professionally. They currently have a system in place where you can't speak to them except in a courtroom. That's insane. If I have a serious case, I should be able to sit down, go meet with the prosecuting attorney, spend time with him, go over the case and review it. What I'm being told is we won't communicate with you. It's going to be by email only, if at all. And in going to court with, a good example is going to district court the other day and having to talk to a deputy prosecutor in the presence of 5 or 6 other lawyers milling about. You can't have a private, intelligent, respectful conversation with counsel on that basis. I intend to change that and make sure that the deputy prosecutors meet with the attorneys on the other side, that they return phone calls, and that they respond accurately and appropriately to responses to resolve cases or to work with opposing counsel. And I forgot the second part, whatever that was, Bill, so forgive me. And I'm out of time.
Well, first of all, I try cases at a high rate for elected prosecutors. Second of all, in addition to the cases that I try, I have a number of cases that I personally handle. You have, in the criminal justice system, set up where a small percentage of cases go to trial. Those other cases have to be investigated, charged, negotiated, pretrial, hearings. That takes up quite a bit of time, and I do quite a bit of that. But that is not my biggest responsibility, quite frankly. My biggest responsibility is overseeing a $2.6 million budget and a staff of 30 people, and making sure that in the 850 felony cases we do every year, and the 30+ trials we do every year, I'm meeting with every one of those deputy prosecutors on a regular basis to coach them, to make sure that they're taking the right cases to trial and that they're prepared to win. We had a prosecutor a long time ago in this county who did nothing but handle his own personal cases. And unfortunately, that's not the best approach. And if you look at successful prosecutors' offices throughout the state of Washington, you'll see you have elected prosecutors who try some cases, they're involved in some cases, and they also spend a lot of time mentoring junior attorneys, working with them to make sure the right cases are going to trial, and coordinating with law enforcement agencies. That is a huge undertaking to make sure that 14 deputy prosecutors are on the ball. And if you think about it from a democracy standpoint, if you don't have somebody in that office who's working with every one of those deputy prosecutors, every one of those support staff members, making sure they're doing their job and effectively fighting crime for you, then how would you possibly have a prosecutor's office that's effective, that you as the people could control and have benefit in your community? And the answer is you could not. You could not. So I made a committed effort to focusing on making an effective team of prosecutors when I took over in 2009, and we have one. We have a lot of different law enforcement agencies in Grant County, and that's pretty inclusive. When you say law enforcement, you're including judges, jailers, the sheriff's department, all the local police departments. And I got to tell you, that's something that I've grappled with. I've talked with the sheriff about that. That is something that the people could do. But what I've told the county commissioners every year when it comes time to budget is I will do everything I can with the funding you provide me. And that's the same approach that Tom Jones has. If you gave me a bigger jail, we could fill it. If you gave me longer prison sentences, we could send them away, and we would do it. Whether or not that is something that's going to happen is up to you. What I can tell you is that you give me the resources, and I'll do every single thing I can with the resources allotted. I won't complain about it. Could I do more? Yeah. You look over in the wars we just fought abroad, every general said they wanted more troops because they could do more with more troops. But at the end of the day, we'll do what we can with what you give us.
Well, I can't give you an intelligent response because I don't know the numbers on what their budget is right now. Obviously, I would support, if necessary and required, to have more officers on the street. But I think it wouldn't be appropriate for me to answer that question until I had a chance to sit down with the actual numbers. All I can say about that is the sheriff's department, if I'm confining myself to just simply that agency, has exploded. I think there was 20 or 30 sheriff deputies when I moved here. I think they're on the line of over 100 now. The population of the county hasn't increased that much, but I'm concerned about when I just say, okay, let's just increase the budget. I think people need to live within budgets. Maybe they need to work harder. Thank you. I'm glad that Vision 2020 brought us together to have this opportunity to speak to you all today, and I'm glad that people took a time out of their day to come down here and listen to us. And hopefully there were some informative things that you heard about both of us. I am just seeking your vote for this position of Grant County Prosecutor. It is something that I've looked at it and thought about it, and the suggestion that I'm just doing this as a retirement, I just want to assure everybody that that ain't so. To me, sometimes you need to give back. When I moved here to Grant County, Grant County didn't face the problems we face now. When I began as a young boy farming out by Royal City and George, we didn't have the population and the problems that go on. I think that I'm in a unique position, given the experience I have, to move this office forward and to give mentoring, solid mentoring and help to the deputy prosecutors. And that's important because I want to increase their skill level so that they can handle themselves well, not only with negotiation, but dealing with practical problems. quite often I look at it and I see not knowing what to do and then just saying, I'm not going to do anything. I'm tired of people coming and saying to me, you know, I was sat on a jury, or I've been to court 5 or 6 times on something that should have been resolved quicker than that. I hope to bring my experience to bear in that area and work with the younger prosecutors so that I can make them aspire to be great lawyers, which will translate out to better handling of our system and more respect for our system, which I think is going down. And so I ask you all to consider and vote for me in the general election. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have closing statements from Mr. Lee, 2 minutes.
I just wanted to first say thanks to all of you. You all just listened to 2 attorneys for an hour talk about how great they are. And so
Speak for yourself.
I can't imagine that you didn't have anything better to do. But I do appreciate you coming. I want to leave you with one thing. I want you to think about this. When people get out of law school, they follow their passion. Some people want to be tax lawyers for whatever reason, because they like numbers. Some people want to be probate lawyers. They want to help people with wills and estates. Or some people want to do winery law. But every lawyer has the opportunity to do what calls to them, what's inside of them, and what they think is important and fulfilling. I chose to be a prosecutor. I've been a public servant my entire life. When I was in the Marines, and now as a career prosecutor. And I'm very proud of that. And I did that not because I thought it would be a great way to make a living. I did it because I think it is a great way to serve, and I think I've done very well at that. I'm very pleased with the team that I've put together, and I'm really pleased to have all of you here today getting involved in this discussion. Because I think a lot of people don't understand exactly what prosecutors do, but we're an integral part of the crime-fighting team that keeps this community safe. And if I'm reelected, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to continue to do what I have been doing, which is take bad people and put them in prison.